Hey guys, what's up, and welcome to some maths behind Broken Myth and Dragon's Eye in comparing it for Aftershock junglers. Now, this is an interesting topic because I did some maths on it yesterday. The maths wasn't quite correct. I was actually looking at total build paths and it was very skewed. So I'm actually going to break it down to something more simple, and we're going to look at just 2-item builds. So Aftershock plus Broken Myth and Aftershock plus Dragon's Eye. That's very important. I will talk about it at the end of the video why, but that is what we're going to compare here. We're going to use 4 very popular Aftershock-based junglers right now, Aftershock CP junglers, Reza, Alpha, Koshka, and Ozo, all of which I will look at some abilities. I'm not going to compare every ability because some of the abilities aren't so relevant, but we're going to compare some of the abilities with these builds. Now let's start with Alpha. We're going to start with her Prime Directive, the initial hit, so no bonus damage from stacks, just the initial hit. And all of the blue numbers is where Dragon's Eye outperforms the Broken Myth numbers, which are in the green. The white numbers is where Dragon's Eye does worse than Broken Myth. So when you notice the comparison between the initial damage and the bonus damage has got high base damage and low scaling. So the bonus damage from the stacks that you get from core charge stacks here for Prime Directive outperforms on Broken Myth just the bonus damage, but when you combine it together, you'll notice that I think Dragon's Eye takes a significant advantage here. So Dragon's Eye in general is going to outperform on Prime Directive, Alpha's A ability, just because of the insane scaling that you get from that ability. Comparing core charge, it's pretty similar because it's got 100% scaling and not particularly crazy base damages. So Alpha in general, we can see here, we can make the assertion that you only need 3 stacks to get better than Broken Myth as a second item if you're only going to go 2 items. That's not hard to achieve as an Alpha, so Dragon's Eye, second item, is better on Alpha, just by the numbers. Let's have a look at Reza here. This is his heroic perk, and we're also looking at Scorcher, his A ability. You'll notice that his heroic perk, at 3 stacks, generally Dragon's Eye is going to perform better, as the same as his Scorcher. You're never going to hit 200 shields, so realistically that's just a number to compare high shielding values, but it's very hard to hit 200 shield on defense. So in general we can see again at 3 stacks, Reza generally is going to outperform with a 2-item build of Aftershock and Dragon's Eye rather than Aftershock and Broken Myth. But Reza doesn't really like to build just 2 items, so obviously this is a little bit skewed in the perception that Reza would only build 2 items, but Reza generally likes to go a little bit further than 2 CP items, so we'll talk about that at the end. But if you're going to go only 2 items on Reza and then go full defense, it's better to go Dragon's Eye. Are you seeing a theme here? I hope you are. In general, we're seeing that it is just better to have Dragon's Eye if you're only going to go 2 items. Let's compare Ozo, 3-ring circus, simple as. No stacks, obviously Broken Myth's going to outperform. At just 3 stacks, 3 seconds in combat, you're going to start to get more damage out of Dragon's Eye on your abilities. Have a look at the first bounce and acro bounce. Maybe up until 6 stacks is really where you're going to start to outperform, but just past 3 stacks, maybe 4 or 5, that's where you're going to see a benefit for acro bounce, especially the first hit for Dragon's Eye, so you can see maybe a little bit more cause to go for a Broken Myth there, and it's pretty similar across his final bounce and his bonus per bounce as well. So in general, acro bounce until 3 or 4 stacks is going to do better with Broken Myth, but once you get past 4 stacks of Dragon's Eye, 5 stacks of Dragon's Eye, that's when obviously Dragon's Eye is going to become better. So at 6 stacks we can definitively say Dragon's Eye is better, so it's somewhere in between 3 and 6 stacks is where Ozo's going to get better with Dragon's Eye than he is with the Broken Myth as just his second item. So it's a little bit more up in the air for Ozo, but in general, if you're going to stick to 2 items, you're looking for elongated fights because you're going to build defenses. It's looking like Dragon's Eye is also the better option on Ozo for just 2 items. Looking at Koshka, her old build was literally just Aftershock and Broken Myth, and then in Eve of Harvest if you could afford it. You compare this to her Dragon's Eye build, if you're just going to go 2 items on Koshka, still looking like really Dragon's Eye is in the lead. Pouncy Fun, her A ability, and her Yummy Catnip Frenzy, the numbers speak for themselves. White numbers is where Broken Myth outperforms, blue numbers is where Dragon's Eye outperforms. The Twirly Death, you get a bit more out of it from Broken Myth, but that's just the damage of Twirly Death itself. Obviously, some of the major damage from Twirly Death comes from the 2 on hit empowered basic attacks that you get, and that's where, even at 3 stacks, Dragon's Eye is significantly outperforming Broken Myth, which is pretty substantial, actually, because obviously Koshka is one of those people that is going to be able to dodge and dance around fights so quickly, especially if you build some defense. It's going to be very hard to take her down, so she's going to work really well with Dragon's Eye as a second item. And just to round things up, this is Aftershock. Aftershock with Broken Myth versus a 2,200 health target, and Aftershock without Broken Myth. So you see you're going to get more damage from the Aftershock on hit by having Broken Myth as well. That is something that you should always take into consideration. It will make a little bit of difference. It might skew some of those statistics, but realistically, this is the conclusions that we are going to draw. In 2 item builds, Dragon's Eye almost always outperforms Broken Myth across those 4 junglers specifically. Where Broken Myth does better is if you have high base damages and low scaling. So high base damages, low scaling, that's where Broken Myth does really well. High base damages, high scaling, Dragon's Eye. Low base damages, medium to low scaling, Dragon's Eye. Low base damages, high scaling, Dragon's Eye. So the very specific circumstance where Broken Myth is better as just a second item is high base damages and low scaling. Broken Myth obviously gets better the more CP you get. The higher and higher values of CP, the more they're going to get affected by shield. So the gap between Broken Myth builds and Dragon's Eye builds, even at the highest CP values, is going to be slimmer when they get affected by shield. So the more items and CP you get, the better Broken Myth gets as an item. Because you need to actually survive to build Dragon's Eye stacks in fights, especially because you are a melee CP carry. You need to build defense. So generally, if you're going to go Dragon's Eye as a second item, it warrants that you invest into defense. It's less like that for Broken Myth, because Broken Myth, as you can see, favors aggressive burst carries. Because if you're going to look to kill someone within 3 or 4 seconds, you're going to do better with Broken Myth than you are going to be doing with Dragon's Eye. If you're looking for longer fights where you imagine that it's going to be going on for more than 4 or 5 seconds, that's where Dragon's Eye starts to take over. So I hope that's been useful for you. I think it's pretty shattered my perceptions after doing the maths. I always favoured Broken Myth in a lot of cases. I actually would always build Broken Myth as a second item. But as you can see here, unless you're looking to straight up burst someone, which is why I prefer it on Reza, by the way, because in Reza I am looking to burst someone within 3 or 4 seconds. That's why I like Broken Myth. If you're looking to go for elongated fights like you would with Alpha or maybe even Koshka, that's where Dragon's Eye is going to come in as just a 2 item build. So hopefully it's been good. I'll see you soon.